My 29th birthday, my parents walked into my apartment like guests who own the place. Dad wore that smug half-smile that always came before bad news. Mom clutched a folder of documents and an expression that screamed self-righteous victory. They didn't even say happy birthday. Instead, Dad placed the folder on my table and said, "Good news. We just secured your sister's business loan. Thanks to you." I blinked. "What?" He grinned wider. "We withdrew your savings. $2.6 million. You should be proud. Your money secured your sister's future." Mom added almost sweetly, "You would have wasted it anyway. You never understood family priorities." I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just stared at them, two people who had raised manipulation into an art form. My name is Ava Monroe, I'm 29, and that morning, I learned that blood may be thicker than water, but greed is thicker than both. For a moment, they mistook my silence for defeat. Dad poured himself a drink, boasting about how family sacrifices build legacy. Mom talked about how money can come back, but reputation can't. I just smiled, because what they took wasn't my real savings. It was a decoy account I'd created 3 years ago. Same bank, same pattern, different destination. The fund they'd stolen was traceable, pre-flagged, and perfectly legal bait. And the moment they touched it, they'd stepped right into the audit net. I stood, poured myself a glass of wine, and said calmly, "Happy birthday to me." They laughed, thinking I'd finally lost it. But inside, I was already counting down. Because in exactly 72 hours, the bank and the IRS would both be calling them. And this time, I wouldn't lift a finger to help. 3 days later, the house of cards began to fall. I was sipping my morning coffee when the first call came, Dad's number flashing like a red alarm. I answered, calm and slow. "What did you do?" he barked. "The bank froze all the accounts. They said something about an investigation." I leaned back in my chair, watching sunlight dance across the floor. "Oh, that? Yeah, I got an email too. Some kind of fraud alert, right? Don't play dumb, Ava," he shouted. "They think we laundered money." I smiled to myself. Strange. Maybe they should ask who transferred it. Behind him, Mom's voice cracked through the line. "Ava, fix this now. You're ruining our reputation. Your sister's distraught." I took a sip of coffee. "You mean the one whose future my money secured?" The silence that followed was beautiful. Dad finally muttered, "You'll regret this. We're family." I chuckled. Exactly. And that's why I left breadcrumbs for the auditors, to make sure family gets full credit for their crimes. They both started shouting over each other, panic leaking through every word. But I was already done listening. I hung up, exhaled, and texted my lawyer. They accessed the flagged account. Time to proceed. Her reply came instantly. "Perfect. Sit tight. We'll let the feds handle it." I spent that afternoon at my office, finishing a proposal for my own startup, the one my parents said would never make money. And as my phone kept buzzing with their chaos, I smiled quietly. Because for 10 years, they thought they were draining my life. But every deposit, every number, every file name had led them straight into a trap they built themselves. The birthday gift I'd waited a decade to unwrap. By the next morning, their panic had evolved into desperation. Mom showed up at my apartment unannounced, hair unbrushed, perfume fighting the smell of anxiety. She banged on the door like a debt collector, shouting my name so loudly that even the neighbors peeked out. When I opened it, she stormed inside. "Ava, you have to fix this," she pleaded, pacing. "The investigators came to the house. They asked about wire transfers, foreign accounts. Your father nearly fainted." I leaned against the counter, calm as still water. "I told you not to touch what wasn't yours." She turned, eyes glistening, tone sharp. "We're your parents. We raised you. Everything we did was for your future." "For my future?" I asked. "Or for the one you couldn't control anymore?" Her lips trembled. "You can't do this to your sister. She's innocent." I sighed. "You mean Emma, the future CEO who registered a shell company with Dad's name last month? Don't insult me, Mom. I do data security for a living." She froze. You knew. I knew everything. The fake invoices, the withdrawals, even the calls to your banker friend in Tampa. You both underestimated me because I kept quiet. She dropped onto the couch, face pale. You set us up. I shook my head. No. You set yourselves up. I just stopped saving you from the consequences. Her voice cracked. Ava, please. We could lose everything. I looked her in the eye. You already did, the moment you treated me like your insurance policy instead of your daughter. She started to cry, but I didn't flinch, because for the first time in years, the guilt wasn't mine. And the silence between us? It finally sounded like freedom. By evening, the story hit the news. Not front page, not yet, but enough to make them sweat. A small headline read, "Local couple under investigation for financial misconduct and wire fraud allegations." The photo underneath? My parents, outside their home, looking furious and terrified. I watched the report from my apartment, eating Chinese takeout, feeling strangely calm. It wasn't satisfaction. It was release. 10 years of manipulation finally collapsing under their own weight. My phone rang again. This time, it was my sister Emma. Her voice cracked before she even said hello. Ava, what did you do? Mom's a mess. Dad's talking to lawyers. You have to help us. I already did, I said softly. I told the truth. You could have just talked to us, she cried. Like the way you talked to me when you stole my savings with them? I asked. She fell silent. You knew, Emma. Don't pretend you didn't. You signed the transfer authorization. Her breathing quickened. They said you'd never notice. I noticed, I said. I always notice. I just waited until the lesson would cost enough to matter. I heard her start to cry. For a second, my chest ached. Not for her innocence, but for how far from it she'd fallen trying to please them. Please, she whispered. What happens now? I glanced at the TV, where the reporter mentioned pending audits and potential indictments. Now, I said. Now you all live with what you built, just like I did. She hung up. I finished my food, closed my laptop, and stared out at the skyline. For years, I'd worked in shadows, cleaning up their chaos. Now I was done cleaning. Now, they could drown in their own mess and call it family. 2 days later, Dad finally called from a blocked number. His voice was hoarse, as if he'd aged 10 years in one night. Ava, listen, we need to talk in private. They froze our assets, everything. The cars, the accounts, even the house is under review. I leaned against the window and watched the city, lights glow like tiny confessions. I told you not to touch what wasn't yours, Dad. His breath shuddered. They say you triggered this. You flagged the account yourself. Technically, I said, smiling, the AI fraud detection system I built for my company did it. I just fed it the right data. There was silence, then a low laugh that sounded half admiration, half defeat. You really set us up, didn't you? I didn't set you up, I replied softly. I set myself free. He hung up without another word. That night, I sat on my balcony as a summer storm rolled in. Thunder rumbled like justice arriving late but loud. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Emma. They lost everything. Mom blames you. Dad barely speaks. Are you happy now? I stared at the screen, then typed back. No, just a piece. I deleted her number after sending it. When the storm finally broke, I felt it. Not guilt, not triumph, but clarity. The kind you only get after surviving people who call betrayal love. They once told me I was too quiet to make an impact. Now their silence echoed louder than any apology ever could. For the first time since I was a child, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I just let the rain fall, washing away the last of their control, one drop at a time. A week later, the news broke bigger than before. Front page headline this time, Florida couple charged with tax fraud and asset misuse. Their names, their faces everywhere. The same people who once bragged about family pride were now being dissected by the media they used to impress. My coworker, Noah, slid the newspaper across my desk that morning. These the folks you mentioned once? Damn, Ava, looks like karma didn't need your help. I just smiled faintly. Karma got my memo early. It was strange how normal life felt while theirs crumbled. I still made my morning coffee, logged into meetings, reviewed contracts for my company's next $3.2 million deal. The contrast was almost poetic. But that evening, an envelope arrived at my office, unmarked, no return address. Inside, a handwritten note in my father's tight cursive. You could have stopped this. You were supposed to be better than revenge. And beneath the note, a faded childhood photo of the three of us at a beach, Dad holding me on his shoulders, both of us laughing. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Because he was right, I was supposed to be better. But they never left me the chance to be. I folded the photo gently, placed it back in the envelope, and whispered, "You taught me this." That night, I walked through the city, its neon lights reflecting off puddles like fragments of old memories. For the first time, I didn't feel haunted by them. I wasn't the daughter they broke anymore. I was the woman they built by accident, resilient, strategic, unstoppable. And as I crossed the bridge toward home, I realized something. I hadn't destroyed my family. I'd simply removed the rot, so I could finally grow. Months passed. Their trial became local gossip, and whispers of their fall spread like wildfire. Colleagues, old neighbors, even distant relatives who once worshipped them started reaching out to me, the daughter they dismissed as too emotional, too naive. Funny how success changes the definition of family. I stayed quiet through it all. No interviews. No statements. Just focus. My company grew faster than ever. 2 new contracts, a national award, and a growing team that respected me not because of where I came from, but because of what I'd built. But one afternoon, my assistant poked her head in. "There's someone waiting for you in the lobby. Says she's your sister." I froze.
Emma.
When I walked out, she stood there, thinner, paler, clutching a cheap purse and a hollow apology in her eyes. "Ava," she whispered. "I didn't know they'd go this far. I just wanted to fit in." I studied her face, the same girl who once laughed when Dad called me a failure. And now, she looked like the ghost of every bad choice they made. "Are they okay?" I asked quietly. "Mom's under house arrest," she said. "Dad's trying to negotiate plea terms." Then her eyes filled with tears. "I lost everything, Ava. Can you help me?" The question hung in the air, heavy with irony. I handed her a business card. Not mine, but my charity's. "This program helps women start over. No strings, no family names. Apply there." She looked at it, trembling. "You won't even talk to me?" I smiled softly. "I just did." And as I walked back to my office, I didn't look back. Some doors stay closed for peace, not punishment. A year later, the past no longer haunted me. It had simply faded. The trial ended with quiet sentences and louder lessons. My parents lost everything, but the world moved on, as it always does.
So did I.
On the anniversary of it all, I drove to the coast, the same beach from that photo Dad once sent. The air smelled of salt and forgiveness. I stood where I'd once sat on his shoulders, waves lapping at my feet. In my hand, I held that same picture, now sun-bleached and soft at the edges. "I forgive you," I whispered, though I knew they'd never hear it. Maybe forgiveness wasn't for them. Maybe it was for me. When I got back home, a package waited on my doorstep. No return address, again. Inside was a simple note in my sister's handwriting. "Thank you. The charity approved me. I'm rebuilding." For the first time in years, I smiled without bitterness. I placed the note beside my desk, under a frame that read, "Legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you build." The sun dipped beyond the skyline as my phone buzzed, an email from a national publication requesting an interview. "We'd love to feature your story, from estrangement to empowerment." I stared at it for a long moment, then typed my reply. "Only if we talk about rebuilding, not revenge." Because the truth was simple, revenge was never the ending. It was just the mirror that made me see who I'd become. And as I turned off the lights that night, I realized I didn't need closure. I already had peace.